In 1794, the brand new government of the United States of America faced its first real crisis. And it wasn't a foreign army. It wasn't a plague. It was a drink. Thousands of armed farmers across western Pennsylvania, people who had just fought and bled for independence, turned their guns on their own government. They burned down tax collectors' homes. They tarred and feathered federal officers. They threatened to march on the Capitol itself. And all of it, every single bit of it, was over whiskey. President George Washington had no choice. He climbed on his horse, strapped on his uniform, and personally led 13,000 soldiers, an army larger than anything he'd commanded in the Revolution, to crush his own citizens. Think about that for a second. The father of the nation going to war over a bottle of liquor?
But here's what most people don't realize. That rebellion, it wasn't really about taxes. It was about survival. Because in 1790s America, whiskey wasn't just a drink. It was money. It was medicine. It was power. And this is the story of how a simple liquid, made from grain, water, and time, toppled governments, built empires, and quietly shaped the modern world. This is the history of whiskey. 1,200 years ago, the most dangerous scientists on Earth weren't in universities. They were in monasteries. Somewhere around the 12th century, in the cold, damp monasteries of Ireland, Christian monks stumbled onto something extraordinary. They figured out how to distill fermented grain into a clear, burning liquid. They called it Whisky. That's Gaelic for water of life. And they weren't being poetic. They genuinely believed this liquid had the power to heal the sick, warm the dying, and maybe, just maybe, preserve the human soul. Now, whether it actually did any of that is debatable. But what's not debatable is what happened next. That recipe spread like wildfire. By 1405, whiskey shows up in Irish records, the first time the word appears in writing anywhere. And by 1494, Scotland's got its own version. The Scottish Exchequer rolls record King James IV ordering 8 bowls of malt sent to a Friar John Core, specifically to make aqua vitae. That's right, a king personally ordering monks to brew him whiskey. That's how important this stuff already was. And this is where the first great war over whiskey begins. Not with swords or cannons, but with pride. Because to this day, Ireland and Scotland are still fighting over one question: who invented it first? The Irish say their monks brought distillation back from the Middle East centuries before Scotland even knew what grain was. The Scots say, hold on, we perfected it. We made it an art. And honestly, nobody knows for sure. But what both sides agree on is that this liquid was about to change everything. Now here's where the story takes a dark turn. In 1536, King Henry VIII dissolved the monasteries across England and Ireland. He seized their land, burned their libraries, and scattered the monks. But he made one critical mistake. He couldn't destroy what those monks already knew. Hundreds of them fled into the countryside, and they took their distillation secrets with them. Overnight, whiskey went from a monastery secret to a people's drink. Farmers across Ireland and Scotland started distilling their own grain. Every barn, every shed, every hillside cave became a tiny distillery, and governments hated it. Because here's the thing about whiskey. It's incredibly easy to make. All you need is grain, water, heat, and patience. That means anyone can make it. And anything anyone can make
governments can't control. So in 1707, after the Acts of Union joined England and Scotland, the English government slapped a massive malt tax on Scottish distillers. The message was clear: stop making whiskey or pay up. But the Scots did something the English never expected. They didn't stop. They didn't pay. They went underground. Thousands of illegal stills popped up across the Scottish Highlands. Farmers distilled at night, hid barrels in caves, and smuggled whiskey through mountain passes on horseback. The British government sent soldiers to hunt them down. And for over 100 years, from the 1720s to the 1820s, Scotland was basically at war with itself over whiskey.
And this is the part that nobody talks about. All that smuggling, all that hiding, all those years of storing whiskey in old oak barrels, barrels that once held sherry and wine. Something unexpected happened. The wood changed the flavor. It turned golden. It got smoother. It got deeper. The thing the government tried to destroy ended up becoming the thing that made Scotch whiskey world famous.
Finally, in 1823, the British government gave up. They passed the Excise Act, making it legal to distill whiskey for a small fee. And just like that, the smugglers came out of the caves, built proper distilleries, and turned their illegal craft into a legitimate empire. But whiskey's real revolution, the one that would shake the entire world, was already happening 3,000 miles away, across the Atlantic, in America. When European settlers landed in America, they brought two things: their Bibles and their stills. Scotch-Irish immigrants flooded into Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Kentucky in the 1700s, and the first thing they did was start distilling. But here's the twist. In America, they didn't have barley like back home. What they had was corn, mountains of it. So they adapted. They swapped barley for corn and accidentally invented something completely new: bourbon. And in colonial America, whiskey wasn't a luxury. It was survival. Clean water was scarce. Milk spoiled fast. But whiskey? Whiskey lasted forever. Farmers drank it for breakfast. Doctors prescribed it for everything from toothaches to tuberculosis. Workers got paid in it. Preachers drank it before sermons. In fact, whiskey was so valuable that it literally became money. On the frontier, where coins were almost non-existent, a jug of whiskey could buy you land, livestock, or labor. It was more reliable than the actual currency. And then came the Revolution. During the American War of Independence, George Washington himself used whiskey to keep his army together. He gave rations of it to soldiers before battle to steady their nerves. He paid suppliers with it when the continental dollar was basically worthless. But here's the part that'll blow your mind. After the war, after Washington became president, after he retired, he built a whiskey distillery at Mount Vernon. And by 1799, that distillery was producing 11,000 gallons a year, making George Washington one of the largest whiskey producers in the entire country. The founding father of America, the man on the $1 bill, was a whiskey mogul. Let that sink in. But Washington's relationship with whiskey was about to get a lot more complicated. Because the very drink that helped him win a revolution was about to start one against him. And if you think you know this story, trust me, you don't. 1791. The brand new United States is drowning in debt from the Revolutionary War. Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury, needs money fast. So he convinces Congress to pass a tax on domestic whiskey. Now, on paper, this seems reasonable. But Hamilton made a fatal miscalculation. He didn't understand what whiskey meant to frontier farmers. These weren't rich men sipping bourbon by the fireplace. These were people who used whiskey as their paycheck.
their savings account, their entire economy. Taxing whiskey in Western Pennsylvania was like taxing oxygen, and the farmers exploded. They refused to pay. They attacked tax collectors. They tarred and feathered federal agents, literally pouring hot tar on their skin and covering them in feathers. In July of 1794, 400 armed rebels attacked and burned the home of a regional tax inspector. They raised their own flag. They talked about seceding from the United States. The country was barely a decade old, and it was already tearing itself apart over whiskey. Washington had a choice: ignore it and let the rebellion spread, which could destroy the young nation, or crush it and prove that this new government had teeth. He chose the second option. In September 1794, President George Washington did something no American president has done since. He personally mounted his horse, put on his military uniform, and rode at the head of 13,000 militia troops straight into Western Pennsylvania. 13,000! That's more soldiers than he commanded at most battles during the Revolution. The rebellion collapsed almost overnight. The rebels scattered. About 150 were arrested. 2 were convicted of treason, and Washington pardoned them both. But the message was sent. The federal government was here to stay. And the irony? The man who crushed the Whiskey Rebellion was himself one of America's biggest whiskey makers. You can't make this stuff up. But the story of whiskey in America, it was far from over. In fact, the craziest chapter was still coming. After the rebellion, thousands of whiskey makers fled south into Kentucky and Tennessee, where the government's reach was weaker and the corn grew taller than a man. And this is where bourbon was truly born. In the 1820s, a Scottish chemist named James Crowe developed something called the sour mash process, a technique that made bourbon smoother and more consistent than anything before it. And by the 1840s, distillers in Kentucky had started labeling their corn whiskey with a name that would become legendary: bourbon. But here's a story that got buried for over 150 years. The most famous name in American whiskey, Jack Daniel, learned everything he knew from an enslaved man. His name was Nathan Nearest Green. In the 1850s, young Jack Daniel, just a teenager, went to work on a farm where Nearest Green was the master distiller. Green taught Daniel the entire craft: the charcoal filtering, the limestone water technique, everything. When Daniel started his own distillery, Green became his first head distiller, the first African-American master distiller on record in the United States. But for over a century, his name was erased from the story. In 1964, the United States Congress passed a resolution officially declaring bourbon a distinctive product of the United States. By law, bourbon must be made in America, from at least 51% corn and aged in brand new charred oak barrels. No other country on earth can legally call their whiskey bourbon. It's as American as the Constitution itself. Now, if you think Whiskey's story is wild so far, subscribe. Because what the American government did next makes everything before this look like a warm-up. January 16th, 1920. The United States government does the unthinkable. It bans alcohol. All of it. Every drop. The 18th Amendment to the Constitution, also known as Prohibition, makes it illegal to produce, sell, or transport any alcoholic beverage anywhere in the country. And overnight, whiskey, the drink that built America, that served as its currency, that its founding father produced by the thousands of gallons, became a federal crime. The government thought they were solving a problem. They thought banning alcohol would reduce crime, improve health,
and strengthen families. Instead, they created an empire of criminals. Within months, underground bars called speakeasies exploded across every major city. New York alone had tens of thousands of speakeasies. Some estimates say over 30,000. More than the total number of legal bars before Prohibition. People whispered passwords through locked doors, drank from teacups to hide the evidence, and paid double, sometimes triple, for a single glass of whiskey. And then came the man who turned Prohibition into the biggest business opportunity in American history, Al Capone. Operating out of Chicago, Capone built a bootlegging empire worth an estimated $60 million a year. That's over $1 billion in today's money. He controlled thousands of speakeasies. He bribed police, judges, and politicians. He murdered anyone who got in his way. The government tried to stop people from drinking, and instead, they accidentally created one of the most powerful criminal empires the world has ever seen. All because of whiskey. Prohibition lasted 13 years, and by the end, everyone knew it had failed. Crime was worse. Corruption was everywhere. People were dying from drinking homemade bathtub liquor laced with poison. On December 5th, 1933, the 21st Amendment repealed Prohibition. The only time in American history an amendment to the Constitution has been completely undone. Whiskey had beaten the United States government. Again. Now you'd think after Prohibition, the story slows down. It doesn't. Because while America was busy banning and unbanning whiskey, something extraordinary was happening on the other side of the planet. In 1918, a young Japanese chemist named Masataka Taketsuru traveled to Scotland with one mission: learn how to make whiskey and bring the craft back to Japan. And while he was there, he did something no one expected. He fell in love. Her name was Rita Cowan, a Scottish woman who defied her family to marry Taketsuru and move to Japan with him. Together, they built the Nika Whiskey Company from nothing. And Taketsuru spent the rest of his life perfecting Japanese whiskey, using everything he'd learned in Scotland. The world laughed. Japanese whiskey? Nobody took it seriously. Until the early 2000s, when Japanese single malts started beating legendary Scotch whiskies in international blind tasting competitions. The whiskey world lost its mind. A drink born in Irish monasteries, perfected in Scottish caves, revolutionized in American cornfields, had just been mastered by Japan. And here's the detail that'll stick with you. Every year, roughly 2 to 4% of all whiskey aging in barrels around the world simply vanishes. It evaporates through the wood, into the air. Distillers call it the angel's share, because they like to believe the angels are taking their cut. Billions of dollars worth of whiskey just floating away into the sky every single year, and nobody can stop it. Not technology, not science, not money. The angels always get paid. Oh, and one more thing. Remember the spelling debate? Whiskey with an E or whiskey without it? Here's the rule. Ireland and America spell it Whisky, with an E. Scotland, Canada, and Japan spell it Whisky, no E. Why? Nobody really agrees. Some say the Irish added the E to distinguish their product from Scottish whiskey. Others say it was just a printing error that stuck. Either way, it's one of those tiny details that whiskey people will literally fight you over. And honestly, I respect that. Right now, the global whiskey industry is worth over $70 billion. Let me put that in perspective. That's more than the entire GDP of some countries. And here's the wildest part. The country that drinks the most whiskey on Earth isn't Scotland, isn't America, isn't Ireland. It's India.
Nobody saw that coming. Meanwhile, a single bottle of rare Japanese whiskey sold at auction for over $500,000 for one bottle of a drink that monks invented to cure the common cold. Here's what gets me. Every single empire, every government, every king who tried to control whiskey, they all made the same mistake. They thought it was just a drink, but it was never just a drink. It was what happened when ordinary people decided they'd had enough. Monks who refused to let knowledge die. Farmers who refused to be taxed into poverty. Smugglers who refused to stop. Immigrants who refused to give up.
Next time you see a bottle of whiskey sitting on a shelf, remember, that bottle holds 500 years of monks, smugglers, rebels, presidents, gangsters, and dreamers. It holds the angel's share, the portion that belongs to the sky. And it holds one simple truth that governments keep learning the hard way. You can tax it, you can ban it, you can fight wars over it, but you will never, ever kill whiskey. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment. Tell me, what food or drink should we uncover next? And if you're new here, subscribe, because every week we dig up the history they never taught you in school.